Across thousands of star systems, a single message appeared at the exact same moment on every Galactic Council communication network. No warning. No build-up. No negotiation. The transmission came from Earth and contained only one declaration: humanity was terminating every treaty, trade agreement, and diplomatic relationship with the Galactic Council effective immediately. Then the signal ended. The silence that followed rippled across the stars. For over 9,000 years the Galactic Council had maintained stability among thousands of civilizations. Wars had been prevented, economies stabilized, borders regulated. Entire species trusted the Council's authority as the foundation of interstellar order. And in the middle of that structure stood humanity, the youngest member species ever admitted. Humans had only joined the Council 120 years earlier. Compared to ancient civilizations that had explored the galaxy for millennia, humanity was still considered new, impulsive, and dangerously creative. Their ideas were unconventional, their diplomacy unpredictable, and their technology advanced in strange ways no one fully understood. Still, they had proven useful. Human engineering reshaped failing infrastructure across multiple star systems. Their trade networks expanded economic zones the Council had never reached. Yet none of that prepared the galaxy for what happened next. Within minutes of Earth's announcement, trade routes began collapsing. Merchant fleets halted mid-transit, waiting for clarification that never came. Automated shipping corridors shut down as treaties governing them were suddenly invalid. Insurance networks froze payments. Entire planetary economies stalled as uncertainty spread faster than light. Panic followed close behind. The Insected Vrathi Collective interpreted the withdrawal as the opening move of a war strategy. Their military fleets shifted to defensive formations across 3 sectors. The aquatic Thauran merchant guilds feared economic catastrophe, calculating losses in the trillions if human trade vanished permanently. Even the ancient Larian archivists, a species older than most recorded civilizations, struggled to explain humanity's behavior. Humans had always been unpredictable. But abandoning the Council without explanation was something else entirely. Across the Council's central chamber orbiting the star Helia Prime, an emergency session was called within hours. Representatives from hundreds of species arrived through hyperspace gates, their ships filling orbital space around the Council ring like metallic constellations. The atmosphere inside the chamber was unlike anything recorded in 9 millennia of governance. Confusion mixed with fear. Human representatives did not appear. Their diplomatic chambers were empty. Their embassy stations had been abandoned hours earlier. Even the artificial intelligence systems that normally managed Earth's communications had been wiped clean from the Council's networks. Every human presence had vanished with surgical precision. Investigators quickly realized the withdrawal had not been sudden. It had been planned. Council security analysts began tracing Earth's final activities inside the Galactic Data Archives. Human researchers had accessed the archives only minutes before their official withdrawal message. At first this seemed normal. Member civilizations routinely studied the Council's immense historical database. But as analysts examined the access logs more closely, something became clear. The humans had not been browsing. They had been searching. Thousands of restricted documents had been opened in rapid succession, many of them buried under layers of security clearance dating back millions of years. Files that had not been viewed by living beings in entire geological eras were suddenly accessed by Earth's researchers in a span of seconds. Entire research libraries had been copied. The deeper analysts traced the activity, the stranger it became. The documents Earth had accessed were not political treaties or military records. They were biological archives. Ancient research reports. Genetic modification studies conducted by civilizations long extinct. Files marked with warning classifications older than most species in the Council. Security officials replayed the final sequence of archive access again and again, trying to understand what the humans had discovered. Among the thousands of documents opened in that final search, one file stood apart. It had been locked behind the highest level of archival security the Council possessed. No living diplomat had clearance to open it. Yet somehow, humanity had. The record showed the file was accessed exactly 3 minutes before Earth transmitted its withdrawal message. 3 minutes before humanity severed every connection to the galaxy. Inside the silent archive chamber, the Council's lead investigators stared at the file name appearing on the projection display. The title was short. Simple. Written in a language so ancient its origin species no longer existed. Only 3 translated words appeared in the modern galactic script. Biological Ascension Program. No one in the chamber knew what it meant. But whatever humanity had discovered inside that file had been enough to make them abandon the entire galaxy without hesitation. Council investigators worked without pause. The sudden departure of humanity had shaken the political foundations of the galaxy, but the archive logs pointed to something far more troubling than diplomacy. Whatever Earth discovered inside the Council's deepest records had forced them to abandon centuries of cooperation in a matter of minutes. The file humans accessed was so heavily encrypted that even the Council's own administrators struggled to unlock it. Layers of security dated back millions of years, written in protocols from civilizations long extinct. Eventually the barriers fell, revealing the contents of the document humanity had read moments before cutting all ties. The file described a discovery made in the earliest era of interstellar expansion. Long before the modern Council existed, explorers from an ancient species had found something drifting through deep space, microscopic biological structures embedded inside fragments of interstellar ice. At first it appeared harmless. The organisms were simple, almost elegant in their design, capable of surviving extreme radiation and vacuum conditions that would destroy most life. Researchers named it the Ascendant Symbiote. Early experiments suggested extraordinary potential. When introduced into living neural systems, the organism bonded with host cells and began repairing damaged tissue at a microscopic level. Aging slowed dramatically. Cognitive processing improved. Memory capacity expanded beyond normal biological limits. Civilizations saw opportunity. The earliest test subjects experienced rapid intellectual growth. Scientists who received the symbiote began solving technological problems that had stalled entire civilizations. Medical breakthroughs appeared overnight. Energy systems became more efficient. Military strategy evolved at astonishing speed. For a time, the symbiote seemed like the greatest discovery in galactic history. Then the first host civilization vanished. The archives described the disappearance in careful, clinical language. Communication networks collapsed across the infected system. Planetary infrastructure failed. Automated stations detected no signs of war, no catastrophic stellar events, no environmental collapse. The species simply stopped functioning. At first, the incident was blamed on political instability. Civilizations sometimes destroyed themselves. The research continued. Another species volunteered for symbiote integration centuries later. Their early results matched the first experiments. Intelligence levels increased. Technological advancement accelerated dramatically. Within 2 generations, their starships were surpassing anything neighboring systems could build. Then they disappeared as well. The pattern repeated across millions of years. Every civilization that fully integrated the symbiote reached a peak of extraordinary development. Their technology improved at impossible speeds. Their biological systems became more efficient. Their societies appeared stronger than ever. Then something changed. Behavioral irregularities appeared first. Leaders made strange decisions. Military forces redeployed without explanation. Infrastructure projects were abandoned mid-construction. Communication between planetary governments grew erratic and inconsistent. Soon after, the civilization collapsed. The archives never described violence or destruction. Instead, they recorded silence. Entire species stopped responding to external signals. Star systems once filled with communication traffic fell completely quiet. Investigators who later visited those regions found empty worlds. Cities abandoned. Technology still functioning but no living inhabitants anywhere. The symbiote had spread to dozens of civilizations before researchers finally noticed the pattern. What they discovered next changed everything. The organism was not improving intelligence. It was integrating with neural systems in a far more complex way than originally understood. Over time, the symbiote formed interconnected biological networks inside the host brain, linking billions of microscopic organisms into a collective structure. At first, the network enhanced cognitive ability. But eventually, the symbiote began altering behavior. Hosts lost independent decision-making capacity. Their thoughts gradually synchronized with the expanding biological network growing inside their nervous systems. Individual identity weakened. Entire populations began thinking in identical patterns, responding to problems with uniform solutions. The symbiote wasn't creating smarter civilizations. It was converting them. Researchers believed the organism was building something far larger than a single host species. A distributed intelligence formed from the minds of entire civilizations. Once the network reached sufficient complexity, the symbiote no longer required its hosts. And the species vanished. The ancient researchers sealed the project records and buried them deep inside the Council archives. The symbiote program ended millions of years ago. Or so the file claimed. But humanity had accessed more than one document during their final search. Cross-referencing additional records revealed something terrifying. The symbiote had never truly disappeared. Fragments of the organism were still being discovered across the galaxy. Medical databases contained isolated references to microscopic neural enhancers appearing in advanced civilizations. Several Council species even reported biological treatments that improved cognition and lifespan using modified microbial structures. No one had connected the pattern. Until humans did. The ascendant symbiote was still spreading. Across the modern galaxy, dozens of species were unknowingly integrating the organism into their biology through medical technology, genetic therapies, and neural enhancements derived from ancient research fragments. Civilizations believed they were improving themselves. But the archive data suggested something far darker. The symbiote was rebuilding its network again. And the most disturbing detail of all was buried in the oldest research notes. The organism did not reveal its true effects immediately. It could remain dormant inside a species for centuries before activating, which meant the infection might already exist across the galaxy, including inside the Galactic Council itself. The moment humanity confirmed what the ascendant symbiote truly was, every major system on Earth shifted into emergency response mode. There were no public debates and no delays for political negotiations. The data from the Council archives was too clear and the risk too enormous. If the organism had already infiltrated multiple civilizations, then every connection between Earth and the rest of the galaxy represented a potential pathway for infection. Within hours of discovering the truth, Earth's leadership executed the most extreme isolation protocol ever attempted by a space-faring civilization. Every diplomatic channel to the Galactic Council was severed. Human ambassadors were ordered to leave Council space immediately. Data links that had been active for over a century were permanently shut down. Artificial intelligence systems managing trade, research exchanges, and military coordination were erased from shared networks. To outside observers it looked reckless. But for humanity it was survival. The directive that followed became known inside human command networks as Protocol Black Sky. The purpose was simple: prevent the symbiote from entering human civilization at any cost. All incoming traffic from non-human systems was blocked. Interstellar gates connected to alien territories were powered down and physically locked. Patrol fleets formed defensive lines across the borders of human-controlled space. Every human colony received the same message: full quarantine. Civilian travel between star systems stopped almost instantly. Cargo vessels already in transit were rerouted back to human ports. Even long-distance communication relays were shut down to ensure no biological or technological vector could cross the perimeter. For many humans, the sudden silence from the wider galaxy felt unsettling. For over a century, Earth had been deeply connected to dozens of alien civilizations through trade and exploration. Now those connections were gone. But the isolation allowed scientists to work. Human researchers had spent decades studying unusual biological interactions between microorganisms and neural systems. Those studies had never seemed particularly important until the archive discovery revealed what the symbiote truly did. Now the scattered pieces of research began forming a clearer picture. The parasite relied on neural synchronization. Each infected mind strengthened the biological network growing inside the host species. Once enough hosts existed within a population, the symbiote began coordinating behavior across individuals. Entire societies slowly lost independent thought as their neural patterns merged into a larger biological system. But humans possessed something unusual. Their neurological diversity was extremely chaotic compared to most species in the Council. Human brains formed unpredictable thought patterns, emotional reactions, and decision-making strategies that varied wildly from individual to individual. That instability made large-scale neural synchronization far more difficult. It didn't make humans immune, but it slowed the process dramatically. That delay had given humanity the time needed to recognize the threat before it reached critical levels. Scientists focused on disrupting the parasite's network communication. If the symbiote depended on linking neural signals between hosts, then breaking that connection could collapse the entire structure. Early laboratory experiments suggested the organism transmitted coordination signals through extremely subtle electromagnetic patterns inside the brain. If those signals were disrupted, the parasite lost control. The solution was risky but theoretically possible. Human engineers designed a transmission system capable of broadcasting a specific interference frequency across enormous distances. The signal would scramble the symbiote's internal communication network, forcing the organism to detach from host neural systems. The idea worked in controlled experiments. Infected test organisms immediately lost the parasite's influence once the signal activated. But there was a problem. The transmission needed to reach every infected world simultaneously. If the parasite's network detected interference in only one region, it might adapt before the signal spread further. The broadcast had to be galaxy-wide and instantaneous. Human scientists calculated the energy requirements for such a signal. The results stunned everyone involved in the project. Broadcasting across the entire galaxy would require power outputs far beyond normal communication arrays. Humanity would need to activate every deep space transmitter, every quantum relay station, and every experimental hyperspace amplifier they possessed. The signal would be impossible to hide. Every civilization in the galaxy would detect it. More importantly, any species already fully controlled by the parasite would recognize the broadcast as a threat. Their fleets could respond immediately, tracing the origin of the transmission back to human territory. If that happened, Earth would become the target of every infected civilization at once. Military analysts estimated the consequences with brutal clarity. Humanity might successfully destroy the parasite's network. But the moment the signal activated, Earth's location would be exposed to forces that could outnumber human fleets hundreds of times over. The galaxy would be freed from the symbiote. And humanity might not survive the aftermath. The final decision took less than 10 minutes. Human leadership reviewed every projection, every military estimate, every scientific model. None of them promised safety. Activating the signal would expose Earth's position to every civilization still under the parasite's control. Even if the symbiote collapsed instantly, there would be confusion, fear, and potentially retaliation from species that believed humanity had just attacked them. But the alternative was worse. If the ascendant symbiote completed its network, independent civilizations across the galaxy would disappear one by one, just as the ancient archives described. Entire species would become nothing more than biological components of a system no one fully understood. Humanity had discovered the threat first. That meant the responsibility was theirs. Orders were issued across human space. Massive deep-range transmitters hidden throughout asteroid belts and distant colonies powered up simultaneously. Experimental hyperspace relays, technology humanity had been quietly developing for decades, were brought online for the first time. Power grids across multiple star systems diverted enormous amounts of energy toward the broadcast network. The signal was ready. When the activation command was given, the transmission exploded outward from human territory like a silent shockwave. The interference frequency traveled through hyperspace relays and quantum amplifiers, spreading faster than conventional communications ever could. Within seconds it passed through hundreds of star systems. then thousands. Across infected civilizations, the effects were immediate. Individuals who had unknowingly carried the parasite for years suddenly collapsed as the symbiote's neural control structures destabilized. The biological networks that had slowly woven themselves into entire populations began breaking apart. Microscopic organisms that once synchronized billions of minds could no longer communicate with each other. The parasite's influence shattered. Ships drifting in space lost coordinated command structures as infected officers regained independent thought. Governments across dozens of worlds fell into chaos as leaders woke from years of subtle manipulation and realized they had been making decisions guided by something inside their own minds. Medical scans confirmed the truth. The symbiote was dying. Without its internal communication network, the organism could not maintain control over host neural systems. It detached from brain tissue and degraded rapidly, leaving infected individuals exhausted but alive. Across thousands of planets, civilizations experienced the same moment of terrifying clarity. For the first time in centuries, their thoughts were entirely their own. Back in Council space, the emergency chamber erupted in confusion as species began reporting identical biological anomalies. Scientists compared data across multiple systems and quickly discovered the pattern linking them all. The symbiote described in the ancient archives had not been theoretical. It had been real. And it had already reached the highest levels of the Galactic Council itself. Several senior council officials collapsed during the first hours after the broadcast as dormant symbiote networks inside their bodies failed. Medical teams isolated the organisms and confirmed they matched the ancient research records perfectly. The parasite had been inside the council for generations. Humanity's transmission had destroyed it. Slowly the galaxy began to understand what Earth had actually done. Humans had not abandoned the council out of rebellion or fear. They had discovered a threat buried in forgotten archives and acted before anyone else realized the danger existed. Months passed before the council stabilized enough to resume normal communication. Investigations confirmed that dozens of species had been partially infected. Some civilizations had come dangerously close to the point of total collapse described in the ancient records. Without intervention, they might have disappeared within decades. Finally, the council assembled again, this time with a very different atmosphere than the emergency session that followed Earth's withdrawal. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in orbit once more, carrying a single message prepared after weeks of debate. The transmission was sent toward human space using the same diplomatic channels that had once connected their civilizations. For the first time since the crisis began, Earth answered. Human communication systems reactivated and accepted the signal. The message contained only a few words, but they carried more weight than any treaty the Council had ever written. Humanity had severed its ties to protect itself. Then it had risked everything to save everyone else. And the galaxy would never forget it.